So my story of the weekend at this conference actually starts in the Albuquerque airport. The conference was in Albuquerque at the convention center. And I got off the plane and found out that my bag had not come on the plane with me. Yeah, it's been a while since that happened. And that it would be on a plane arriving 4 hours later. This is 6 in the evening at this point. And they couldn't guarantee delivering it to my hotel room until probably late the next day. So staying until my bag got there became the reasonable alternative. And so I'm in baggage claim. I can't go back through because I don't have a ticket, right? Where I could have maybe sat in a restaurant and had a nice glass of wine. So what I did was settle in, figuring the contemplation was going to start early and that I'd have 4 hours. What actually happened, though, is there was another man in this largely deserted area who was in a similar situation, although his bag was coming in about an hour earlier than mine. And he sat down, clearly wanted to have conversation, and asked me a few questions and determined that I work in a church and that I was there for some kind of a religious conference. And then he began to talk. And for the next 2 hours or so, he really spoke to his worldview, his understanding of Christianity, and his understanding also of the relationship of Christianity to empire. It was a very, very dualistic point of view. We are good and we are evil, and if you consider yourself to be good, you should be fighting evil. And evil looks like many, many people in this country. And being aligned as a Christian with empire, in this case, our government, was a good thing and part of the goodness. And what I heard in his voice, and some of it sounded a bit like conspiracy theory, and some of it I didn't follow really well, but what I heard in his voice was fear and deep concern for his country, and he was very articulate. This is not someone who had a disordered understanding of reality. He was really quite articulate, but grounded in a form of Christianity that is highly, highly dualistic. And I got to the conference, and of course, it turns out it was entitled Revisioning Christianity. So the next morning I walk in, but it really, my take on it, is it was about revisiting earlier forms of Christianity, primarily the Desert Mothers and Fathers, a form of Christianity that was not particularly dualist, but that resonated with a gospel of unitive love. And Richard Rohr in particular kept coming back to this theme over and over. And what all of the speakers actually also focused on is that we are not living in unique times at all, that there is a long, long line of holy men and women who lived in times very similar to ours, including St. Benedict and St. Francis, among many others. And that it has been a 20th century struggle to understand how Christianity and we Christians can be in relationship or not in relationship with empire, which is always there, always. And how we can bring forth the kingdom, which certainly in the understanding of Richard Rohr, and it is my understanding, this unitive love brings forth the kingdom of heaven on earth, that is what it's about. Not unlike in the Gospel of Thomas, where Jesus says, when you make the above like the below, and the inside like the outside, then you will enter the kingdom. And so it's this idea of the union of opposites. And at one point, Richard Rohr told a story. He cast an angel in this story. It turns out it is a story about Rabia, who is one of my favorite Sufi saints. So I don't know why he changed it and didn't give her credit. But the story goes like this. Rabia is running through the town of Basra, which is where she lived, and she is holding a torch in one hand and a bucket of water in the other. And she is questioned about this crazy behavior, essentially. And she says that it is her wish for people that she could burn down heaven and quench the fires of hell so that we would love God, because it was our birthright. And so again, it's this movement away from this understanding that began in early Christianity. Richard Rohr blamed it on Plato. I don't know that I'd give that philosophy so much credit. I think we human beings love to cut everything up into categories, and categories with very firm boundaries that we can kind of understand the world in. I'm in this category, that person in another, and it perhaps makes us feel like we've cornered the truth, or we're at least in control. And there's something, appealing about that at some level, I think, for a lot of us. But it is not consistent with the Gospels. And the Gospels, if we read them carefully, of course, are always, again and again and again, about this unitive love. I wanted to talk a bit about a model for how we think about our journeys as Christians. This came up this morning in Staff Chapel, and it reminded me of a couple of things that I had learned over the years. We're on a journey. In this case, there was a talk of a journey that was somewhat linear, but maybe not. I was reminded of a teaching from Bishop Rosamond Miller that I learned 30 years ago, where she talked about the world being a cross. And when we dwell in the extremities of this cross, that we are scattered and we are lost. And that when we gather ourselves into the center, we become whole, we become one. We have that unitive experience, and that is the transformation to the kingdom of heaven. What also I thought about today, and I'm going to end here pretty quickly, because I really do believe in short reflections. But next week I want to talk, because the Jewish mystics also have a model. It's a metaphor of a rose, but it's a similar model, this idea. They see a thread, a mystical thread through all the scriptures, including much of what we call the New Testament, because it is so heavily informed, of course, by the Hebrew scripture. A model that sees this same kind of unitive love unfolding in our story of how we walk with and relate to God. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that next week. We'll stay on the same topic.